Hello, and welcome to the Michigan Alliance for Families on-demand webinar, Transition, Employment Expectations. My name is Karen Wang, and I am the Transition Specialist for Michigan Alliance for Families. Michigan Alliance for Families is your one-stop resource for information and training on IEPs, Individualized Education Programs. Everyone here at Michigan Alliance for Families has a loved one who has or had an IEP, and I'm no exception. I have an adult son who started in the special education system at age 1, and I have a high school student with a 504 plan. So everything that I'm about to explain today is something that I personally have been through and I am going through with my own sons. We're so glad you decided to join us today. The purpose of today's workshop is to help families and self-advocates see that employment is both possible and very rewarding. The way we do that is to start with high expectations for a fulfilling life as an adult, regardless of the type of disability. Set goals for the future that you can work toward. Since we spend most of our lives not in school, but as part of a wider community. Even if your young adult is unable to work right now, you can still think about what would need to change to make employment possible. We'll also discuss taking steps to build up job skills and to explore career options, again, regardless of the type of disability. Throughout the workshop, I'm going to ask open-ended questions intended to help you create a vision for the future. I want each person to leave this workshop with some action steps toward employment and resources to make that vision a reality. Of course, we'll also review public programs and supports that can help guide you on your journey to employment. And we'll also go over experiences and the best practices related to career development. The reason we're here today is to plan for community inclusion. And employment, either with or without support, is a big part of that. One of my son's teachers said to me many years ago, "Keep your eyes on the prize." The teacher was talking about my son's personal goal of earning his high school diploma, but to me, the real prize is my son living his best life as an adult, feeling welcome and included, and making a positive contribution to the world we live in. Throughout this workshop, I'll be coaching you to complete a basic vision planning worksheet, which is available on the Michigan Alliance for Families website. You can print out the worksheet at home, or you can just jot down your responses in a notebook at home. The purpose of this workshop is to help you develop post-secondary goals that can be used in IEP transition planning. You could also bring the worksheet to meetings with your vocational counselor as you plan transition services. My son and I have been working on his vision planning continuously from middle school onward into adulthood. Many of his ideas from middle school, like learning how to take care of himself, cooking his own meals, hiking on nature trails, working on photography, art, and creative writing, are now essential parts of his day-to-day adult life. So here's the first question for your vision plan. You can print out the worksheet at home, or you can get a blank notebook at home to jot down your answer, because I want you to have a rough outline of your completed vision plan by the end of our workshop today. If you're a self-advocate, what do you hope your adult life will look like? If you're a parent or a family member, what do you hope adult life will look like for your loved one? Think about what you'd like for a daily routine. And I mean self-care, cooking meals, housekeeping, yard work, walking the dog, banking, going to the post office, recreation, friendships. Think about what gives you a sense of purpose and motivation. My adult son has a creative mind. He loves music, writing, cooking, painting, drawing, and exploring state parks. So all of these things are part of his life. What's going to be part of your adult life? Before we can talk about anything else, we really have to discuss our expectations of young adults with disabilities. Expectations are quick predictions about how much value a person is able to contribute. Expectations are beliefs that something will happen. If we expect that a person is able to contribute meaningfully, then that person will naturally receive more opportunities to contribute. When I was teaching high school and college, I would ask lots of questions in class to make it as interactive as possible. I could usually tell from a student's facial expression if they would be able to answer correctly or contribute meaningfully. That's what's meant here by quick predictions. I would often skip the confident student and call on someone who wasn't sure about the material so that we could have a productive discussion and get all of the students up to the same level of understanding. If you stop and think about it, these quick predictions start even before a child is born. I know that when I was expecting my first son, my husband and I talked about our child someday attending the same college that we attended and met at. But when our toddler was diagnosed with an intellectual and developmental disability, our expectations shifted. And we still expected him to achieve his personal best and to live an extraordinary creative life. But how many of us have heard statements starting with, "She just can't," or "He'll never be able to"? I know I did. Those are examples of low expectations. Some of our low expectations might come from hearing statistics about the high rate of unemployment for adults with disabilities, the high rate of housing and employment discrimination, and the high rates for poverty and social isolation, even with services and accommodations in place. We all know that physical and social barriers still exist for people with disabilities. Let's take a look at how expectations can feed upon themselves. Here I compare the cycle of high and low expectations for our youth with disabilities. When we start with high expectations, it means that we're always looking for new opportunities for growth. It also means we're more likely to take a risk on a new opportunity that presents itself. That opportunity might mean job shadowing for a day with a family friend, or chatting up someone at the credit union about internships for high school students, or volunteering to serve at church. By the way, these are all examples that I have personally done. When I say high expectations, I'm talking about taking actions that are both optimistic and realistic. Not every opportunity is a successful experience, and that's okay. Failure is a learning experience. When my son applied for the credit union internship, he didn't get a callback or an interview, but he filled out the application, he wrote a cover letter, he updated his resume. When we maintain high expectations, we understand that we're playing the long game, and we allow room for these failures. The purpose of each opportunity is to create a connection in our community, and that connection can lead to another connection and another. until a new opportunity presents itself. As our youth learn more and develop new skills and network in our local areas, our expectations also grow. We want our youth to develop a wealth of experience so that they can learn how to make adult decisions. On the other hand, when we start with low expectations, our tendency is to prevent our youth from making decisions. We do things for them. Our instinct is to protect them too much. Someone once told me, every time you do a task for your child, you are preventing him from learning that skill. When youth are overprotected and prevented from trying new activities, any mistake, any failure can provoke anxiety. I remember one time my husband was upset that our son was not completing a big project on schedule and he wasn't following through on loose ends. My husband was insisting that I get our son to follow the schedule that he had already written out. I asked, "Are you saying that he's not allowed to make mistakes?" That question made my husband even more upset, I admit it. But he backed off, and our son continued to make progress at his own pace. When youth are not allowed to fail, it usually results in even more overprotection and even fewer opportunities for growth. This is where we often see young adults sitting at home, watching TV, playing video games, because they have nothing else to do. No longer in school, no job, not learning to cook meals or do laundry, few, if any, responsibilities. We call this the school-to-couch pipeline. When we perceive that a young adult lacks life experience, we lower our expectations even further. But it doesn't have to be that way. Let's circle back to that first question. What do you hope adult life will look like? What do you expect adult life to look like? Think about the skills that are needed to fulfill those hopes and expectations. Maybe you need to start with some basic cooking lessons at home so that your young adult can learn to use the stove and prepare meals. Maybe you need to include your young adult in doing chores or running errands with you around town. Maybe your young adult needs to learn social skills in public places. Whatever your hopes and expectations are, they're unique to your young adult, and the skills that are needed are also unique. And here are some reasons why employment is the key to community participation and independent living. Earning income is, of course, one of the main reasons why people seek employment, but it's not the only reason. We know that most working adults identify strongly with their line of work. Employment is directly connected to a person's sense of self-worth. Recently, I took my son and a bunch of his friends, all of whom have disabilities, to the movies. Two of his friends told me about their jobs at a grocery store. One of them loved it because he felt like he was helping people and providing a needed service to the community. But his other friend said, "It's not what I want to do forever, but it's a good job and I'm building my resume." That's what I mean by self-worth. Some of the employment outcomes that we might want to aim for are a sense of purpose or inner motivation. And that can mean different things for different people, such as learning to make the perfect latte or training dogs to interact better with their humans. By allowing the dignity of competitive employment, people can learn new skills across the lifespan. How many of us parents are still at the same job that we had when we were 22 years old? We can aim for being part of a work team and supporting customers. In other words, building friendships and professional relationships in a community. All of these positive outcomes contribute meaningfully to a healthy mind and emotional growth. And yes, also income. For those of you who may be concerned about too much income interfering with public benefits, we'll go over work incentive programs later on in this workshop. Now for the second question on our vision planning worksheet. For self-advocates, what is your greatest skill or attribute? For parents, what is your loved one's greatest skill or attribute? You can write down your response in your notebook or fill out the worksheet if you've printed it. But I want you to think about an activity or a situation that brings joy. Think about what makes your loved one unstoppable. Think about strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. We can use the acronym SPIN for that. That's where you start looking for employment. I know of a young woman with Down syndrome who has a sunny disposition and loves to make other people happy. That's her greatest attribute. She works part-time in the mornings as a hostess for a breakfast buffet at a hotel. Her job involves setting up and heating the food, making coffee, greeting each guest, writing personal thank you notes for each guest, refilling food as needed, and cleaning up. She has a manager who believes in her and was willing to take extra time to train her. Hotel guests love her friendly, personal touches, and it's all because of her sunny disposition. In my son's case, he was a toddler who loved flipping light switches and pressing buttons. He was unstoppable, so instead of attempting to stop that behavior, I taught him to use the dishwasher, the washing machine and dryer, the vacuum, and so on. He absolutely loved pressing those buttons, and he loved the feeling of being helpful. I also taught him to use a camera. It was hard for him to get the images in focus at first, but he learned. He started taking photos on nature walks with me, and then he started entering his photos in art contests. And then he won the contests. He learned how to frame his photos, and he had solo art shows with dozens of his pieces. This is how an attribute can evolve into a vocational skill. When discussing employment skills, self-advocacy is usually at the top of the list. Self-advocacy is actually a set of skills, not just one skill. And anyone can learn these skills. And yes, I do mean anyone, including people who communicate nonverbally. Self-advocacy means literally, I speak up. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean verbal communication. The picture here shows sign language, but there's also assistive technology, picture cards, facial expressions, and gestures. In my family, we say behavior is communication. When my son is having a sensory problem with food or a headache, I can tell from his behavior. These communication behaviors can be encouraged and developed in daily activities at school, at a doctor's office, at home, or out in the community. Self-advocacy also means I understand what I need. So at the doctor's office, you might tell or show the nurse that you have an earache. Or at school, you might tell your guidance counselor that you need to switch around the classes on your schedule. When things go wrong, self-advocacy means that you are the one who will make your situation right again. So it could mean taking the medicine on schedule to clear up an ear infection, or making sure that your schedule has the right classes to help you graduate on time, or asking for help when you're not sure about something. Asking for help is something that everyone has to do sooner or later, and it's an important part of self-advocacy. Basically, these skills are to communicate what you need, set a goal to get what you need, and to do each step to achieve your goal. When my son was in high school, he really did not want to take a ceramics class. Most of the other students with IEPs were just automatically placed in that class. He really wanted to take more business classes. So he talked to his counselor, he explained what he wanted to do after high school and which classes he wanted. He got the perfect schedule that he wanted, and he had a great school year. Basic self-advocacy skills will become necessary by the age of 16 because that's when the student will be invited to any IEP meeting where transition planning is to be discussed. Of course, students are always welcome to participate in their own IEPs at any age, no matter what type of disability they might have. But at the very latest, they will begin participating by age 16. So it makes sense to start practicing early. Our youth can self-advocate successfully when they understand what their disability is and how it impacts everyday life. Our youth can increase their self-awareness and self-confidence when they have access to important documents and understand what's in their IEPs. When our youth understand their rights and receive appropriate support to prepare for and participate in their IEP meetings, they are also taking a step towards employment. One of the recommended tools in planning for employment is the Positive Personality Profile, or PPP. This is another worksheet available on the Michigan Alliance for Families website. The PPP provides a systematic method to take note of a job seeker's positive attributes and interests. The information gathered here can then be used for writing a resume, preparing for interviews, creating an individualized plan for employment, and further developing post-secondary goals in the IEP. Too often, we spend IEP meetings and other consultations focused on a person's challenges and limitations. The PPP is intended to flip the script so that we focus instead on strengths and possibilities. The question that we're focusing on for this section of the workshop, what is your loved one's greatest skill or attribute, will fit right in here. So by answering that question, you've already started a positive personal profile. Let's figure out each of the profile's categories with a specific example of a student. Here we'll walk through the PPP with the example of a job seeker named Logan. Logan's personal goal is to meet Captain America. He is a Marvel superfan. Logan's talent is that he is able to focus on a task or goal in a noisy, fast-paced environment, especially if that goal is related to his interests in movies and games based on movies. Logan is in an 18 to 26 skill building program in his public school district, and he has developed skills making professional quality holiday crafts and floral arrangements for the school's annual open house and art show. He also has kitchen skills, cooking his favorite foods, mac and cheese and chicken tenders, and cleaning up after himself when he cooks. Logan has strong general knowledge of his local community and the USA, based on his involvement with adaptive recreation and family trips to theme parks and Comic Cons. His father has taught him to grill outdoors at family barbecues. His learning style is multisensory, which means that he learns best with reinforcement through seeing, hearing, and moving through new topics. His personality is laid back, friendly, and curious, and his temperament is generally quite cheerful until he reaches his physical limits. Logan is family-focused and kind to others, and he dislikes feeling too hot, and he dislikes pudding-like food textures. One of his quirks is wearing a superhero-themed shirt almost every day. Logan has many challenges, including delayed fine motor skills, expressive language, cognitive impairment, delayed cognitive processing, physical stamina, and gross motor coordination. Although he can walk, he does have some mobility issues. Logan states that he would prefer an indoor job or a job with limited outdoor time. Logan does not have any paid work experience yet, but he has enjoyed the arts and crafts program at school, and he has experience volunteering at church and at a local food pantry. Logan has a strong support system, including his mother, father, younger brother, and his maternal grandparents who live locally. Logan may benefit from accommodations such as assistance with resume writing and mock interviews, a support person during the interview, a job coach for up to 16 weeks, a modified work schedule, modified job training, and additional soft skills training, and written instructions supplemented with pictures for each job task. Now, what do you think some of his desired outcomes or possibilities could be? Every item on this worksheet is a talking point for both the IEP team and the vocational counselor. Maybe some possible outcomes could be to start with part-time employment, ideally at a movie theater or some type of game center to match his interests. Since Logan has some experience with food preparation, one possibility is to pursue ServSafe food handler certification with adapted lessons and testing. Most theaters and game centers sell food, so this credential would support Logan's employment goal. Another possibility is to volunteer with Parks and Rec for their summer movie nights in the park, or to volunteer at church for a family movie night. If Logan could get a temporary weekend job working with a Comic-Con vendor or convention ticketing staff, he might even get to meet Captain America. Self-advocacy, vision planning, and a positive personal profile can all contribute to IEP transition planning. So I'll take a moment here to explain how that planning process works. First and foremost, transition planning is not a one-time event. It's a process that changes with the needs of the student over many years. The transition planning process starts with assessments. The Educational Development Plan, or EDP, gets completed by 8th grade for every student, regardless of disability. And transition planning will start at the very latest in the year that the student with an IEP turns 16. Then there will be additional assessments to identify the student's long-term strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, their SPIN, as they transition to adulthood. The team, which includes the student and the family, will use the results of those assessments to create measurable post-secondary goals. Post-secondary goals are meant for the long term, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but they're reviewed and updated annually at the student's IEP. These goals must be written in each of the 4 following areas: education, training, employment, and independent living if applicable. These are going to be long-term goals for living, working, and learning as an adult. With those goals in mind, the team plans out a course of study for high school. Course of study is considered a transition service that is provided to all students in Michigan. It might mean a diploma following the Michigan Merit Curriculum, with or without a personal curriculum, or it could mean a certificate of completion, which means exiting school without a diploma. Whether or not a diploma is being pursued, students can choose specific courses to support their post-secondary goals. So there's going to be a big difference between a vocational technical course of study and a pre-business course of study, for example. Transition services can be provided by the school or a vocational rehabilitation agency or other agencies or the family, depending on what the student's goals are. Now, these steps don't necessarily have to occur in this exact order, and if the student's needs or preferences change, it's always possible to go back and redo one or a few of these steps. When the student turns 18, coordinating adult services will become a priority. The purpose of each stage of planning is to ensure a smooth transition without surprises. Hey parents, take a moment to think about how you found your first job. I delivered newspapers as a preteen. My older brother trained me, and then when he moved on to a higher paying part-time job in high school, he recommended me to his manager. In turn, I trained my younger brothers so that they would be able to take over the delivery route after a few years. We know that relationships provide many more job opportunities than posted ads. Families can use their personal networks to assist in the job search and job development. Everyone has access to some type of network within their community, starting with your neighbors. Maybe you also belong to a professional association or a union or a civic organization or a place of worship. Be open with your relatives about the type of job opportunities you're seeking. For example, maybe grandpa's fishing buddy knows of a business that needs some extra help on the weekends. Casual acquaintances are another great resource because they can bring fresh insight to the issue, and their personal networks can connect with your networks. One of my son's high school friends was having difficulty finding a part-time job while she was in college. So we asked if she'd like to be trained as a respite caregiver for our son, and she said yes. Another example, when my son attended another friend's graduation party, he talked to the caterer, which led to a wonderful part-time job. Former colleagues may also know about job openings or volunteer opportunities. Perhaps the office manager at their new job needs an assistant one day a week, or maybe their new organization has a client in need of new talent. When families use their personal networks to investigate work-related experiences, they are contributing to their loved one's success and demonstrating their high expectations for the future. And now for our third question on the vision planning worksheet. What is your greatest concern when thinking about employment? Jot down your response in your notebook or fill out the worksheet at home. I know that my son's greatest concern was his safety. He was worried about having a seizure at work or just becoming overtired from standing and then falling down. He was also concerned about not knowing what to do and not getting the support that he needed on the job. Some people may not even know where to start to look for help with employment. In this section of the workshop, we're going to cover vocational rehabilitation services and work incentive programs. Now we're going to talk about employment supports available to people with disabilities. The first stop for job seekers who have disabilities is usually a vocational rehabilitation agency. But some youth and adults don't know what vocational rehabilitation is, and in some cases, they may even refuse the services they need just because of a misunderstanding. I say this because it actually happened to my nephew. Every state in the USA is required to have a vocational rehabilitation agency, and these agencies are all supervised by the Federal Rehabilitation Services Administration, or RSA. In Michigan, those agencies are Michigan Rehabilitation Services, known as MRS, for most people with disabilities, and the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, known as BSBP, for people with visual impairments or deaf-blindness. Vocational rehabilitation means a series of services for people with disabilities that will lead to competitive and integrated employment. Those services can start as early as age 14 for youth who want to develop job skills. Some services can be delivered in school or as part of a school's internship program in the community. So it's really important to discuss employment goals during IEP Transition Planning. Vocational rehabilitation also means personalized counseling according to a person's unique needs. For example, some people will need development of specific skills, such as social skills for the workplace or workplace behaviors. Others may learn to use adaptive equipment, depending on the type of their disability. Vocational counselors may request assessments to understand a person's interests and skill levels. When my son met with his vocational counselor, he learned how to complete forms to get services. He filled out job applications with assistance, and he discussed types of jobs and training programs that he wanted to try. Skill building is a key component of vocational rehabilitation. If a person becomes disabled as the result of an injury, they may need to learn new skills to adapt to the workplace. Other skills covered in vocational rehabilitation might include practice interviews, learning how to disclose one's disability to an employer, learning how to request appropriate accommodations in the workplace, learning how to interact with coworkers and customers, and earning credentials. Now, credentials might not necessarily be a diploma. Credentials can also be certificates for specific training, such as forklift operation. My nephew earned cybersecurity credentials from an online course. Those are examples of job skills that employers notice. The whole idea behind vocational rehabilitation is to provide the support system needed to remove the barriers that people with disabilities face while seeking employment. A vocational counselor will help the individual create a plan for successful employment, including services and supports along the way. When my son had his first paid work experience, he was assigned a job coach who worked with him one-on-one to learn each task of the job. As a result, his confidence and excitement about employment grew. Vocational rehabilitation counselors consult with employers to learn about job openings and to ensure that a workplace is appropriate for a person with disabilities. Employers must be willing to participate in the vocational rehabilitation process in order to get referrals. One time, my son's counselor was contacted by a movie theater looking for general help, so the counselor sent over my son's resume and helped my son get in touch with the theater manager. He had an interview a few days later. Vocational rehabilitation assumes that people with disabilities are capable of full inclusion in the workforce alongside non-disabled coworkers with appropriate supports and accommodations. Sometimes you may hear the phrase employment first when discussing vocational rehabilitation with your counselor or the IEP team. Employment First is a national framework established by the U.S. Department of Labor based on the idea that all individuals, including those individuals with the most significant disabilities, are capable of full participation in competitive integrated employment and community life. In other words, the federal government believes that everyone benefits when people with disabilities have employment in their local community and live outside of institutions. The federal government encourages each state to create policies that support competitive, integrated employment for people with disabilities. And by the way, Michigan became an employment first state by executive order in 2015. So I mentioned that VR is a series of services, and here I have those services listed. At age 14, our youth will start with pre-employment transition services, commonly known as pre-ETS. I know that when my son was 14, that collection of words made absolutely no sense to me, so I'll break down exactly what that means. Pre-ETS can include assistance with writing a resume, interview practice, as well as filling out job applications. It also means training about when and how to disclose one's disability and how to interact with coworkers. The personal behaviors, routines, and traits that help job candidates get hired and succeed at work are referred to as soft skills. I was very pleased when my son received coaching from VR in this area. Some of this training can be provided in school in coordination with the special education supports and services. VR counselors can also be invited to annual IEPs to provide input about transition services and post-secondary goals. If the VR counselor is unable to attend the IEP, they can still provide a brief written report to share with the team. One thing that I would do is I'd print out the recent emails from the VR counselor and bring those printed emails to the IEP meeting. There will also be assessments, first to determine if the youth is eligible for VR services, then to learn more about the youth's career interests and abilities. For example, my son enjoyed the hands-on assessments in various trades. When the youth is determined to be eligible for vocational rehabilitation services, then the youth, the family, and the counselor will create an individualized plan for employment, or IPE. Just like the name suggests, this is going to be similar to an IEP in school, except that it's for career planning. An IPE is a contract between the youth and the VR agency with clear steps leading to a specific job placement goal, including a budget to provide support at each step. Another part of the IPE will include guidance on post-secondary training. This may mean a certificate program or some other job credential, or maybe a trade school, and yes, even college programs. In Michigan, we are very fortunate to have outstanding options for youth with disabilities in each of these categories. A VR counselor is trained to identify types of accommodations that a person may need on the job, and these accommodations will be listed in the IPE. Accommodations may include adaptive equipment, extra time to complete job tasks, modifying the work schedule, or having a sign language interpreter at a meeting. When a person is placed in a paid work experience, they may be eligible for job coaching at work for a limited period of time. A job coach is someone who helps people with disabilities learn how to perform their work duties and use their accommodations. The training should be tailored to the employee's unique needs. A job coach may work with a person individually or in a group setting, coaching several people at once. Sometimes a job coach will do a job analysis first, which means breaking up the job into smaller tasks to be taught one at a time, and then will create a plan to help the employee become more effective and self-sufficient. A job coach will be faded out in a pre-specified time period that we agree upon before the job begins. One of my son's favorite activities in VR was attending job fairs. VR hosts local job fairs every year, sometimes including a summer job fair for youth. This allows the job seeker to meet directly with employers who already have a professional relationship with VR, and many employers conduct interviews on site. Finally, job development means finding and creating an employment opportunity for a person's unique skill set. The opportunity must be aligned with the job seeker's IPE and their post-secondary goals in the IEP. And I have to tell you, in most cases of successful job development, the opportunity was found through personal networks at a smaller business. All of these services are topics to discuss when you meet with your VR counselor. Michigan Rehabilitation Services, or MRS, is often the first stop for youth with disabilities on their path to employment. MRS works with both businesses and individuals with disabilities to develop customized workforce solutions. Applying for VR services is different from requesting special education services in school, and these are the steps that you're going to follow. First, there are two ways to apply. You can call the 800 number here on this slide to request an application and an intake appointment, or you can complete the online application and email it to MRS. And note that the online application is available in English, Spanish, and Arabic. Vocational rehabilitation has its own rules about who is eligible for services. In school, everyone's entitled to a free and appropriate public education, but in VR, you are only eligible if you have barriers to employment due to your disability. A VR counselor will guide you through the eligibility process. I found that it was helpful to bring a copy of my son's most recent IEP to the first meeting. One of the first questions will be if you have a state-issued photo ID, so it's also helpful to get your ID before the appointment. If you are eligible for VR services, the counselor will then ask about types of work that you're interested in and will help with some career exploration activities. The next step is to create the Individualized Plan for Employment, or IPE. The plan will outline specific action steps to be taken by the counselor and the job seeker, and it includes the cost for training, career exploration, and other supports. There are going to be responsibilities on both sides, and the job seeker is expected to follow through on the plan in good faith. After the plan is signed, the counselor will check in with the job seeker periodically to make sure that the plan is being followed. Training will be scheduled, and when the job seeker is ready, the counselor will find an appropriate paid work experience for the job seeker. In Michigan, we are very fortunate to have outstanding training resources for job seekers with disabilities. MRS operates the Michigan Career and Technical Institute just north of Kalamazoo, which is a fully accessible facility with workshops for various trades such as woodworking, graphic design, auto mechanics, and certified medical assistants. My son earned a certificate in retail work at MCTI, and the campus was stunning. It's on a lake with walking paths, a gym, a bowling alley, a dorm, a cafeteria, all under one large roof. When the job seeker has completed training and at least one paid work experience, the goal is to find permanent, competitive employment, and the VR counselor assists in finding those job openings to apply for. The other major VR agency in Michigan is the Bureau of Services for Blind Persons, or BSBP. BSBP assists people with visual impairments or deafblindness, and there are specific medical requirements to receive services. So it's helpful to get a copy of recent testing or a letter from a physician stating the type of impairment, the precise visual acuity, and if the impairment is degenerative. The process of getting services and finding work is going to be similar to the process at MRS. There's no online application for BSBP, so you have to call the 800 number here on this slide. There are some basic screening questions over the phone. When meeting with the VR counselor to determine eligibility, bring the photo ID and the most recent IEP and the most recent medical documentation. The counselor will recommend activities for career exploration, and then the individualized plan for employment will be developed. My experience is that BSBP places a heavy emphasis on training because people with visual impairments often need to learn how to use adaptive equipment for their job accommodations. For example, the picture here on this slide shows a Braille keyboard. BSBP has its own training center in the city of Kalamazoo where people can learn Braille and how to use a white cane to get around town, how to access a talking library, as well as general life skills to get organized and ready to work. BSBP has the same goal for job seekers that MRS has: placement in a paid work experience and permanent competitive employment. When I was in graduate school, I contracted with BSBP to record textbooks for a college student with a visual impairment, and I tutored the student using a closed-circuit TV that also enlarged text so that he could follow along. That experience made me aware of the possibilities for people with disabilities. Specialized instruction and technology are available through VR, even when you might think it's impossible. In addition to the VR agencies for people with disabilities, the 2014 federal law, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, has a statewide youth program that provides vocational training and paid work experiences. This was another wonderful resource that supported my son in his transition to adulthood. In addition to his counselor at MRS, my son had a second counselor through WIOA who worked with him on the job application and job placement process. The WIOA youth program is for youth ages 14 to 24, and this includes youth who are in school and out of school. The program has its own requirements for eligibility that are different from MRS and BSBP, but one of those requirements is that the youth must face significant barriers to employment due to financial need or disability or other specific circumstances. WIOA can provide tutoring, mentoring, and many different types of training. I already mentioned the assistance that my son received with the job application process, but WIOA can also provide training to earn career-related credentials, such as a GED, OSHA 10, which is for basic workplace safety, or a technology certificate. After my son filled out job applications and did some soft skills training, his WIOA counselor worked with his MRS counselor to place him in a paid summer work experience with a one-on-one job coach. So what I'm saying here is it's not an either-or situation with VR. It's both and. By using all of the resources and supports available, my son was able to interview independently for another seasonal job at a cider mill after this. This is how vocational programming can support personal growth and self-confidence. In Michigan, the WIOA Youth Program is administered by Michigan Works, which has local offices all around the state. And you can request more information and an appointment with a counselor by calling the 800 number on this slide. But wait, there's more. There are many approaches to building a resume and developing job skills and working toward realistic post-secondary goals. On this slide, I have some additional pathways. An apprenticeship means on-the-job paid training with a mentor. Apprenticeships can be found through personal connections or VR or a trade school or other community resources. Some popular examples of apprenticeships are HVAC maintenance, cosmetology, medical assistantship, and food service. Job Corps is a federally funded training program for low-income youth ages 16 to 24 with or without disabilities. Training for specific trades is provided at 3 campuses across Michigan in Detroit, Flint, and Grand Rapids, plus 117 other locations nationwide. The trades that they offer training in are in 10 areas such as homeland security, hospitality, and manufacturing. In addition, Job Corps has 24 civilian conservation centers nationwide that provide training in forestry and wildland firefighting. The civilian conservation centers nearest to Michigan are in Kentucky and Wisconsin. Project Search is a 1-year transition to work program for youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The Project Search teaching model is based on workplace immersion and hands-on training at rotating work sites. Because this teaching model was originally developed at Cincinnati Children's Hospital in Ohio, many of the work sites are hospitals, but there are also banks and utility companies that participate in the program. The goal of this program is permanent placement in competitive employment. A community rehabilitation program, or CRO, is usually, but not always, part of a local nonprofit organization, and it provides direct vocational rehabilitation services to people with disabilities. For example, it might be a local training program for a specific skill set like baking or cybersecurity, or a skill building program that visits local businesses to learn about career opportunities. My son lost skills during a health crisis, so he is currently in a vocational skill building program at a local CRO. For some young adults, these programs can be the first stepping stone on the path to competitive integrated employment. One of the major employment concerns for people with disabilities is losing benefits while earning income. So I'm here to tell you that there are many programs already in place to help you maintain your benefits and save money while employed. I know folks are going to have a lot of questions here, so bear with me while I explain the basics. Let's start with the Social Security Administration's work incentive programs. Social Security has its own formula that gets updated every year for how much income a person can earn while receiving benefits. If a person is receiving Social Security benefits and would like to work, the first stop will be the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance, or WIPA program. A WIPA representative can help you figure out which of the following work incentive programs will be the best fit for you and can guide you to start the application process. The basic allowances for earning income are referred to as general exclusions, GE, and earned income exclusions, EIE. In this context, exclusion means how much income will not reduce the monthly benefit. Personally, I found that the best way to stay on top of all of this was to use the Social Security phone app for reporting monthly income because it automatically calculates the monthly benefit using the current Social Security formula. Ticket to Work and the Plan for Achieving Self-Support, or PASS, are both programs coordinated between Social Security and vocational rehabilitation. Both programs allow a person to earn income on top of their Social Security benefits for the purpose of gradually reducing their dependence on the benefits. I recommend discussing the Ticket to Work and PASS program with a VR counselor and at an in-person appointment at your local Social Security office. The next program is specifically for students age 22 or younger. Students under the age of 22 years old who receive Social Security benefits may be eligible for the Student Earned Income Exclusion, or SEIE. This exclusion means that students who earn income from work don't have to count that income when calculating their monthly benefit. The formula for this exclusion changes every year, so you should consult with a Social Security representative to find out if you are eligible. After a Social Security beneficiary is employed, it is possible to deduct the cost of some impairment-related items and services from gross income. These are called impairment-related work expenses, or IRWE. The idea here is to make sure that work-related expenses have less of an impact on monthly benefits, because people with disabilities often have significant out-of-pocket expenses related to their medical conditions. Some examples of expenses that could possibly be covered might be transportation to and from work, a prosthesis or medical device not already covered by insurance, or a support person to help you get ready for work. Impairment-related work expenses must be discussed with a Social Security representative before filing a claim. I know this is a lot of confusing information about Social Security. So I want you to know that the Social Security has an online Red Book that explains Social Security work incentive programs. And if you think you might be eligible for one of the programs, you should make an appointment with a Social Security representative to discuss it. These incentives can greatly increase a person's ability to cover expenses, get vocational training, and save money for the future. Next, Disability Rights Michigan has federally funded programs to support people who face problems with Social Security or vocational rehabilitation. The PABS program, which stands for Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security, is related to Social Security's Ticket to Work program. The PABS program is for Social Security beneficiaries who want to work and need help accessing VR services and getting workplace accommodations. The PABS advocates at Disability Rights Michigan provide information, advice, and advocacy for free. The Client Assistance Program, or CAP, is a free information, referral, and advocacy service for people who have difficulty specifically with vocational rehabilitation. CAP advocates can advise you on your rights and responsibilities with VR And they can help you file an appeal if you are denied VR services. You can also call a CAP advocate if you just have questions about VR or you're not sure what to do next. Finally, the Michigan Department of Treasury administers an important program for beneficiaries of Social Security, the Achieving a Better Life Experience, or ABLE account. These accounts allow a Social Security beneficiary to save up to $100,000 without affecting their benefits. ABLE accounts have their own rules for eligibility, so I strongly recommend checking out the website to learn more about it and to call the Michigan Department of Treasury to talk to a representative. I know this is a lot to take in all at once. My point here is that employment for people with disabilities does not have to mean sacrificing quality of life. The supports are out there, and this is just a quick summary of what's available so that you know where to start. Now that you know about the available supports, what do you need to feel hopeful or energized about future employment? Write down your answer on the vision planning worksheet or in a notebook. For me, I felt like I just needed to know who to call and how to get an appointment. I felt like all of the adult services were a total mystery and disconnected from our school experience. For my son, his main concern was what would happen to him after he graduated from high school. He needed some type of schedule to know what would happen to him. Where would he go? What would he do during his days? Would he have friends? He really wanted to get a job that matched his interests. He loves to press buttons, so he was hoping for a workplace with an elevator and a cash register that he could operate. Sometimes adults think of employment like a switch that gets turned on at some point in life. But for people with disabilities, it's going to be a process, and success is going to look different for each individual. One of the oldest complaints of job seekers everywhere is that you need work experience before you apply for a job. So, how can you build a resume full of work-related experiences? For both of my sons, I started with volunteering at an early age. Volunteering can help develop awareness of work in a low-pressure environment. It can even be included as a work-related experience on a resume. Volunteering is a way to build work skills and to explore work environments, but it's not going to be a long-term alternative to employment. Once a person becomes aware of work as an adult activity, they may want to start earning credentials. We usually think of credentials as a diploma or a degree, but it could also mean an apprenticeship, a skills certificate from an online course, a certificate for learning a type of software, or another achievement. When my older son was enrolled at trade school, he earned the OSHA 10 certification for basic workplace safety, and he earned a credential for retail inventory tools. When my younger son was having trouble finding a summer job, he used his time at home to complete a ServSafe food safety certification, and he also earned some software credentials. Credentials demonstrate to an employer that the job seeker is learning skills for a specific goal. Job shadowing is another great experience that really helps a person visualize their employment goals. You can use your personal network to find someone to shadow. For example, I have a Facebook friend who offered to allow my younger son to visit her environmental engineering firm. Or you could talk with a vocational counselor or company representatives at a job fair to make it happen. Let's take a look now at types of community organizations where you can find some of these work-related experiences. Local community organizations can offer pathways to develop work-related experiences that are aligned with the job seeker's interests and passions. Look around your local community for nonprofit organizations such as food pantries, other charities, or social advocacy groups. Schedule a time to volunteer and network with the people there while you work. Civic organizations such as scouting or adult fraternal organizations are always seeking new members and provide many creative opportunities for community service, for leadership roles, and events. My older son always serves as my teaching assistant when I run the Disabilities Awareness Merit Badge for Scouts. Recreational organizations such as athletic teams or art programs and conservation groups are a fantastic resource for providing credentials, volunteer opportunities, and paid work experience. For example, my younger son earned a credential as a certified archery coach. And by the way, archery is an Olympic sport that can be adapted easily to all ability levels. My nephew has a physical disability that prevents him from playing the sport he loves, football, but he has several years of experience coaching and analyzing plays. Adaptive sports organizations, such as Miracle League or Special Olympics, are always looking for volunteers. Paid work experience as a scorekeeper, an umpire, or day camp counselor is sometimes available through Parks and Rec departments too. Finally, city government can help in some surprising ways. First responders may be able to give tours of their equipment and office, and I know of one family that arranged for their young adult to volunteer as an office helper at the police department headquarters. On election day in Michigan, poll workers are paid for their time by the local government. My city has a public art gallery where my son applied for permission to display and sell his artwork. The jury approved his artwork, my son prepared it for exhibition, and he had a fabulous opening reception and show. Cities regularly post jobs and volunteer opportunities. You'll never know what you may find, but you have to look. When a person has spent time building job skills, writing a resume, and practicing interviews, they may be ready for placement in a paid work experience. The first job is typically supported and facilitated by VR. The key is to make sure the job matches the person's annual and post-secondary goals in the IEP, as well as their employment goal in the IPE. For example, if the person wants to pursue a restaurant career, the first job might be bussing tables at a cafe. VR will screen job openings to make sure that they are competitive and integrated, but oftentimes the first paid work experience is going to be seasonal or temporary to see how the person adapts. So if a grocery or restaurant career is the goal, maybe that first step will be picking tomatoes at a farm for 3 weeks in August. In my older son's case, he was interviewed in the VR office for a summer job with a free lunch program for children in need. He got the job. He was assigned a job coach to assist him each day. When summer ended, that job ended too. But then my son interviewed at the local cider mill, where he worked closely with a bakery supervisor, but no job coach. That job ended when the cider season ended, but those experiences completely transformed the way he thought about adulthood. And here's the last question for your vision planning worksheet. Based on the information we've covered here, what are 3 action steps that you can take toward employment success? I first learned about vocational rehabilitation through another parent in my son's special education program. For me, the 3 action steps were to help my son call the VR agency for an intake appointment, to gather his documents for the meeting, his photo ID, social security card, his most recent IEP, and to help my son update his resume. But what about you? What are your action steps? Maybe you have a friend that you want has connections in the community for possible job openings. Maybe you have a lot of family living locally that you could start talking to about employment possibilities. Whatever your goals are, the steps you're going to take will be unique to your situation. We know from decades of data that employment for people with disabilities is a best practice that leads to a fulfilling life as an adult. We also know the ideal steps that remove barriers to employment and increase the likelihood of permanent placement in a rewarding career. Starting early with awareness of what employment means and simple volunteer activities in the community, such as helping with the school book sale fundraiser or cleaning up trash in the park, can then lead to work-based experiences like organizing a garage sale. These activities build up the expectation that employment is a part of life and a way to connect with others. Instruction should be tailored to the interests and the needs of the individual. When my son was a preschooler, I joined his interest in pressing buttons, and I showed him how to operate the vacuum, the dishwasher, the washing machine. These chores were incredibly rewarding to him because they matched his interests. As we plan for a student's transition from high school into adulthood, the student can select classes that match post-secondary goals and career interests. For example, my son took high school electives on cooking, financial literacy, photography, entrepreneurship, retail operations, and even television broadcasting. Again, these were the classes that matched his personal interests. Each of those classes also helped prepare him for adult life and employment in a different way. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities like my son may benefit more from hands-on learning and not so much from lectures. So it's important to make sure that the instructional style matches the student's needs. Getting the right types of support can make employment possible, even when it seems otherwise impossible. And this means a lot of teamwork. Families can support the process by teaching the job seeker how to manage their schedule, how to communicate with potential employers and counselors. Families need to be aware of their rights and responsibilities in the VR process, and they need to learn how to access services. Job coaching can be a great support to help a person learn the specific tasks to do a job, and job accommodations provided by the employer can increase the employee's success at completing those tasks as independently as possible. Coaching and accommodations can both be part of a well-designed workplace. All of these steps together can lead to a healthy quality of life with full participation in the local community. In summary, every person has strengths and challenges, but that doesn't mean a task is impossible. When we recognize and document those strengths and challenges, we can create a realistic plan for successful employment. Support for people with disabilities who want to be employed is available, but we need to know what those support structures are and which supports will work best for the individual. Today, I mentioned several agencies and work incentive programs, and we have links to those on the Michigan Alliance for Families website, michiganallianceforfamilies.org. Many jobs are not advertised, and more people get jobs through personal connections than through advertisements anyway. So think about who you might know. Who might be able to help point you toward a good entry-level job? Connect with local organizations that might be able to provide additional work-related experiences. All job seekers have to practice their work-related skills before they start working. This means learning how to express themselves, how to talk about their accomplishments, how to interact, as well as the tasks that might be related to their work performance. Success is rarely instant. For most of us, it's a process that develops over a long period of time. Once we understand that everything is a learning experience, we can reevaluate our strengths and challenges and the types of support that we need. After all, that's what it means to be an adult. Those are the slides that I prepared for today, and I'd like to open it up to questions. I strongly recommend that you call your regional parent mentor at 800-552-4821 with all of your questions about transition to adulthood. You can also check out our website, michiganallianceforfamilies.org, for handouts and links to all aspects of the transition to adulthood. Here I've gathered some resources that could be helpful to you. I'mDetermined.org has a worksheet to help with identifying a person's strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, plus lots of information about living a self-determined life as an adult. I also have the 800 numbers for MRS, BSBP, and Michigan Works here on this slide. The Job Accommodation Network provides free, confidential technical assistance about job accommodations and the Americans with Disabilities Act. They have an 800 number for live counseling and a teletype line for people with hearing impairments. The Career One Stop website is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor. It has career exploration and career advisory tools, as well as information on employment for people with disabilities. Think College has resources for people with intellectual disabilities about attending college for non-degree credentials and career planning. Several of the colleges on the Think College website are located in Michigan. I strongly recommend checking it out, especially if college is off your radar. There are even more resources in our website, and I really hope all of this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Michigan Alliance for Families is here to support you. Please do not hesitate to reach out directly to your regional parent mentor for more information. Follow our Facebook and Instagram, check out our video library on YouTube, and explore our website. Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDEA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and we are Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, PTIC, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Again, our contact information is on this slide. Please reach out with all your questions, and we hope to hear from you soon.